Hey folks, today we are going to start talking about cutting up some vegetables for our chicken stir fry. So you had 8 to choose from, and you had to choose at least 3 of those. So I'm going to go through all 8 of them today. So even if your group didn't choose all 8 of them, I'd like you to be familiar with on how they're cut. A couple things before we cut though, I'm going to show you one, how to properly sharpen the knife using our handheld sharpeners. There was a video on the HyperDoc, so hopefully you watched that. If you didn't, you'll pick that up here. The second thing I'm going to show you to do is kind of a refresher is how to properly hold the chef's knife. I'll show you very quickly on the other 2 that are in your knife block, but the chef knife is the one that we'll use the most. So I'll refresh you on that. Again, there was a video in the HyperDoc for that one as well. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, hopefully you'll pick up something quickly here. And then third, I will show you how to cut all of the vegetables, all 8 of them that we use for the chicken stir fry. So just sit back, make sure you watch through all of this before we get started. Please know I will be checking each one of you before you are able to cut. So even though you're in your kitchens and you have all your vegetables, I'm still going to have to double check and make sure that you can properly hold the knife, and then your stabilizing hand has to be able to keep the fingertips out of the way. So we'll talk about that when we talk about the holding of the knife. All right, let's get ready. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to use our handheld sharpeners. What's really nice about these is that they work whether you're left-handed or right-handed. And there's numbers engraved down here. There's a 1, a 2, and a 3. For our particular knives, we only use the number 2 and the number 3. So the number 2 kind of hones it and sharpens it and kind of pulls off all the nicks. And then the third one kind of smooths everything out. So in your kitchen, all 3 of your knives, which are in the knife block, you have a chef's knife, which is the large knife. You have 2 others. You have a utility knife, which is shorter than a chef's knife. And it's kind of the all-around purposeful knife. And then you have a paring knife. So this one you can see is shorter than the utility knife. The paring knife is really great for like cutting fruits, peeling peels and things like that. So you are actually in your kitchen, you're going to sharpen all 3 of your knives. But with this particular sharpener, we don't use all 3. Again, we're only going to use number 2 and number 3. So inside it creates like a V, which will smooth things out. So when you put the knife in, you're going to start all the way towards the back. All right, so you can see it's all the way in. Keeping one hand firm here with the thumb underneath to keep it out of the way, you're going to draw the knife straight back and kind of curve to the tip. Once, twice, and the third time. Now, once you do the third time, you're going to move over to number 3, and this just kind of smooths out. 1, 2, 3. Now, our knives are going to be sharpened every single hour. That way, all of you know how to sharpen the knives. And you're going to do this with all 3 of the knives in your block. So know, especially if you're at the end of the day, these knives are going to be very, very sharp. So please be very careful when you're holding them, when you're sharpening them, when you're putting them back into the block. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to properly hold the knife. And believe it or not, this is actually really important. So if you didn't watch the videos that I had on the HyperDoc, I do recommend that you go back and rewatch them just to make sure that you catch everything. So with our chef's knife, we take our first 3 fingers, our last 3 fingers, the pinky, the ring, and the middle finger, and those get wrapped around the handle. The next thing is your index finger. This top knuckle should rest on the very top of the chef's blade. And then your thumb is going to kind of pinch the blade in between your knuckle and the thumb. So the blade is right in the middle. What's nice about this is with your 3 fingers wrapped and pinching the blade in between, you have, as you squeeze the thumb and the knuckle together, you have complete control over the blade. If we put our finger up top here, our finger can slide off real easy, all right? So we kind of lose that. And if we hold on like the baseball grip, it's more control than the finger on top, but you don't, it kind of slides, all right? So it's really not as safe. So ultimately, to make sure that you have complete control over the blade, it's definitely better to pinch it between your index knuckle and that thumb to have a better control. Now, I will admit I have a harder time sometimes with these chef's knives. They're a little bigger than the ones I have at home. The one I have at home is only a 5-inch. This one is a 7-inch, so it's a little bit longer. So for me, it tends to get a little uncomfortable if I'm doing a lot of chopping. So by the time I get done with all of our vegetables, my hand is going to be a little sore. But it's still always the safest bet to wrap those 3 fingers around, to pinch between the knuckle and the thumb to have complete control. Now, with your other hand, so this hand, we want to make sure we keep all of our fingertips out of the way, because I want you to leave with everything that you came into class with. So when we are cutting something, we want to make sure that with our stabilizing hand, come up and kind of put with your fingertips on the ground, and then you're going to kind of roll forward just a little bit. So what it does is it keeps these fingertips behind, and the thing farthest forward is going to be your middle finger. Those knuckles are going to be the very first thing. Your thumb, we don't want it hanging out here, okay? If you can't tuck it behind, back here where it presses into the food, then you can tuck it underneath and use that. And then sometimes I'll use the bottom, this pad part of my thumb to kind of hold things, but always keeping those fingertips tucked in. Otherwise, if you can keep your thumb back here, it keeps your thumb out of the way, so it's not like a stray guy and you take off the end of your thumb. All right, so we want to make sure our fingertips are bent, the thumb stays out of the way. When we are cutting, remember, between the knuckle and the knife, you want to make sure that you hit this middle knuckle. The tip of the knife should never really leave the cutting board, and you follow through with that rocking motion. Okay, we don't hack, we don't chop. When you're cutting, you make sure it hits the knuckle and comes down. Hit the knuckle and come down. With this, you're going to kind of move your fingers together with the knife. We never want to feed the food into the knife. We always want to start at one end and end up at the other. So we don't want to start here with a carrot and end here with a carrot. We want to start here with a carrot and end here with a carrot. So that way we're making sure our thumb is staying out of the way. Okay? Here's that you need to be aware of. Your vegetables are going to come to you in a plastic grocery sack. So what I'll do, since I know what each kitchen wants, I'm going to go through. All the peppers will be divided into quarters, so you will get a quarter of a bell pepper, a couple cloves of garlic, a couple of carrots, and then portions of the cauliflower, mushrooms, broccoli, celery. So just know that I'm just going to go through and I'm going to just chop them up, and then they go into the different bags that everybody needs, and they'll be labeled for your kitchen. Something that you need to remember is once you get these back to your kitchen, you're going to need to wash them and make sure that they're clean before you get started. So like our bell pepper here, some of them might still have stickers on them, and I'm not going to look for that. I'm seriously just going to cut it in half and then cut those halves in half and toss them into a bag. I'm not going to wash them. I'm not going to peel off any stickers. The same thing is going to go for the mushrooms, and we'll talk about cleaning the mushrooms here in a minute, but you're going to need to make sure you clean your mushrooms. The celery is going to come in the large chunk. The ends won't be connected, but I'm not cleaning any of the stem stuff off. So all the lettuce leafy stuff that's here is going to be here. Same with the carrots, and we'll talk about the carrots. I'm just going to put the carrots in there. The choice is yours, whether you want to peel them or not, but you still need to wash them. So if you're not going to peel them, then that's fine. You still have to wash them. If you're going to peel them, I highly recommend you wash them first, and then I'll show you how to use the peeler. Same thing with the onion. So as we go through each vegetable, just know that I have cleaned these before I cut them. Right now, you're kind of seeing them in their raw state in their packages as they are. So I will fix that here in just a minute. To do that, I will wash them under cool running water. And then once they are clean, I will put them into the colander. So all the extra water is going to drain out, and kind of leave that in the sink so that they don't drip water everywhere. So a couple tips on cleaning the vegetables here in just a second, and we'll be back. Okay, so the first vegetable we're going to talk about is the mushrooms because I want to get those done and out of the way. Remember I said when you clean the vegetables, we want to clean them under cool running water. The only difference on this one is going to be mushrooms. These little critters, we don't want to run underneath water. They're very full of water already. So if you put them underwater and start to rub the dirt off, they're essentially going to soak up more of the water and they're just going to turn to mush in your hand. When you cook them, they kind of soften down anyway. So when it comes to washing a mushroom, you want to just use paper towel that's slightly damp with some cool water. And then all you're going to do is just wipe off any dirt that might be on it. So just gently. It's okay. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of the skin that'll peel off with it, and that's fine. You just want to kind of clean it up as you go. You don't have to pull the stems off of this, and we'll talk about them when we cut them. The stems are full of flavor. They're full of nutrients anyway, so you can go ahead and leave the stems on. It's not going to do anything. The only difference would be if you're making like a stuffed mushroom, something like that, then you want to pull the stems out, and usually we just dice those up and put them inside. So that is going to be cleaning our mushrooms. Let me get rid of this. So we're going to start out with cutting our mushrooms. I keep kind of a bowl for trash off to the sides for scraps. And then each one of you is going to get a bag. You'll label that with your kitchen number. So remember, it's hour first, then the letter K, and then your kitchen number. So that's what's going to go on a piece of tape, and it's going to get stuck to your bag. And this is what you're going to put all your vegetables in. So I definitely recommend kind of opening that up, folding the top down a little bit, and keeping it. The other tool that's going to be helpful aside from your knife is in drawer number 1, and this is a blue scraper. These are really nice for dough because you can scrape it on the countertop and it kind of has an edge here to get underneath. It's really great when you're doing vegetables because it's kind of a bigger hand, so you can kind of use it to scoop and then put them into the baggie for your vegetables. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do some mushrooms. So I'm going to grab a good sized mushroom. What's nice with mushrooms when you slice those, the mushrooms, you're literally just going to slice them. You want slices of mushrooms. So you don't want them too small and you don't want them too big. So kind of a happy medium, kind of a Goldilocks, if you will. So you want to kind of make sure that it's not going to go too far. Go ahead and make sure you tuck your fingers back and kind of holding this in place. You can see my thumb is here. And then I'm going to come up and I'm just going to slice right down, move my fingers back just a little bit, using this middle knuckle as my guide, and then slicing down. This one's kind of a big slice, that's fine. So you get these nice little pieces of vegetable of mushrooms. So we'll throw those in the bag. You're going to get a few of these if you chose mushrooms as your option. And again, just go through and slice them up. You can use the chef's knife. You can use the utility knife as well, or the paring knife. Especially with these smaller vegetables, it's really easy to do. Sometimes the chef's knife is a little bit of an overkill, I think. You don't need something so big. We used to have a video that you watched and it showed you how to use a meat cleaver. That guy was using a big old meat cleaver to cut celery, and I, again, think it's kind of a little bit of overkill. So I'm going to do this last mushroom here, and then we will move on. So the last one. All right, so there's our mushrooms. They were big enough, so I didn't really need the scooper, but I'm going to come back in and get all these little bits that kind of have fallen off and put those in there, and we will move on to the next. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you how to cut is the celery. So make sure that you wash it off, especially down here at the end. It's kind of where it starts to come up out of the ground and you tend to get a collection of dirt. So we want to make sure that we wash away that dirt to kind of make things more sanitary. So what I like to do first is to take off just that end piece right here because it's where it attached to the bottom. It tends to be not as tasty. So just cut that off, and I'm going to throw that in my trash bin. Over here, you'll notice the leafy greens are on the end. I don't like the leaves, but these still little stems that are here, those are still edible. So why chop off some extra celery when you're kind of looking for flavor? So I kind of find out where my leaves start, and kind of fold them up, and then I'm going to come back and just take off that little bit of edge, and then this is all still good. Now here's the problem when it comes to celery. Celery is a little bit wobbly, okay? So to eliminate that problem, if you just roll it over, it gives it more of a stable and sturdy end for that to sit on. I'm going to take this tip off there. So it doesn't roll quite so much. Now, when it comes to celery, if you cut straight across, all the water veins and stuff go in here. So it's going to kind of shrivel up. The easiest way to kind of prevent some of that, and for celery, you want to cut it what's called on the bias. And that's by cutting it kind of, instead of straight, you're going to cut it at a slight angle. So what I'm going to do, again, coming in, making sure that my thumb is staying out of the way and my fingertips are tucked under, I'm just going to take off a slight angle on the edge of my celery. And then I'm going to move in and cut. And then you just kind of retreat your fingers a little bit, kind of like a spider walking backwards, moving my thumb and pushing down in with my fingertips. See if I can angle this a little better for you. Again, coming in and cutting down. And my celery pieces are not straight up and down, they're kind of curved off to the side. So the more comfortable that you get with using the sharp knife, the quicker you're going to be able to go. I don't expect any of you to speed through this. I would prefer that you not speed through it because I'd rather you be safe. Remember, no blood, no fire, no vomit. So take your time when you're cutting the vegetables. You don't want to bring the blade up higher than your knuckles because you have a higher chance then of coming down and cutting yourself. Make sure you keep your fingertips out of the way. You keep your thumb tucked backwards. You have that blade pinched between your knuckle and your thumb, and then try to keep that knife blade, if at all possible, on the table or on the cutting board. You have less of a chance of cutting yourself by keeping it on there. Now these end pieces, where it's a little bit thicker, are a little bit big, so I line those up, grab some of those and kind of cut back, and then I'll put the tip down here, and then putting my hand over the top, I can come down and then slice those in half. So those are a little bit thinner. They're a little bit easier when they cook down. So I'm going to use my bench scraper and clean up the celery and get that out of the way. All right, for those of you who have chosen red bell pepper, you're going to get a piece of bell pepper. They will be already cut for you. So this stuff here on the inside, you don't need it. What's nice about bell peppers is they're pretty soft, so you can go in and pretty much just rip it right out. You can cut it out. My problem with that is don't use the chef's knife, use the paring knife, which is the small one. But it's still kind of a little bit of overkill because this membrane is very soft, and it really is pretty easy to rip out and peel out. You could almost use a butter knife or even just a spoon to kind of scoop at it. If you have any little seeds in there, those rinse out really well, or they just tap over a garbage can or your scrap bowl. So now the problem is, remember, when we're cutting foods, we want to make sure that they don't roll on us. So if we try to cut this bell pepper, which we're supposed to cut these into slices, we're going to have a little bit of a problem. So they kind of roll all over the place. And even if we kind of flip it over, it's not very stable. So this is my favorite part. If you are cutting a bell pepper, we need to kind of flatten it. So the best way, honestly, just to flatten it is to force it flat like that. It will break it a little bit in places, and that's fine because you're just going to cut it up. So give it a good whack. It's going to break some of the pieces on the inside, makes it a little more flexible. It's totally okay. Now, my favorite part about cutting the bell peppers is because they're actually pretty soft. They're easy to cut. So this one, again, taking your chef's knife, keeping your tips of your finger tucked under and your thumb out of the way. You just start with the tip of the knife right up top, and you're just going to slide it straight down and through. And then scoot over and slice, slice. You get to leave the tip on the board the whole way through. When you start getting a little bit closer, just make sure those fingertips stay out of the way and your thumb, and slice. So now you have these nice little slices. They're kind of big, so it's up to you. You can leave them whole like this. Sometimes I like to kind of line them up. Again, doing the same thing, tip on the board halfway through, put your hand on top, and then come down and slice. And then now you have peppers that are a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to chew, and not so cumbersome in the bowl. Okay, so the next vegetable we're going to do is the carrots. And again, you have kind of a choice. You can leave them as they are once they've been washed, or you can peel them. So in drawer number 1 is the vegetable peeler. And so for this, you can leave it on the cutting board. Remember, you have 2 cutting boards in each of your drawer number 3, and then you have 3 knives. So there's plenty for everyone to be doing. So with the peeler, and most people don't realize this, with the peelers, it actually can peel in both directions. So it's always kind of fun to peel for me because you can just go back and forth and it peels it really fast. A lot of people will just take their time and do one and another. I'm all about getting it done so you can peel in all directions or single directions. Whatever works best for you. So again, using my bench scraper, it's not only good for picking stuff up, it's picking up trash to move that out of the way as well. Some people like to peel over a garbage can. The problem I have when you peel over a garbage can is, what if you drop the carrot? So now your carrot's in the garbage can. You can rewash it depending on what is in your garbage can, but sometimes that's just kind of gross. So now you've lost one of your vegetables, and that's wasting money on food, which is not cool in my book. So I try to do it either over the sink with something in the drain to prevent the garbage or the vegetable waste from going down into the drain, or like here, doing it on a cutting board so that it's easier for cleanup. Please remember, yes, you do need to wash the vegetable peeler. Be very careful when you wash it because it is also a sharp blade. Okay, so now again, going back to our rolly veggies, carrots are definitely a little bit rolly. These ones aren't too bad. These ones are smaller. This particular bag that I picked up kind of has some smaller carrots to it. The bigger bags that I tend to get, the 2-pound carrot bags, sometimes those are a bigger diameter of carrots, and so they're extra rolly. You can always trim off a piece or cut a carrot in half, especially depending on the size of the carrot and how much of a bite you want. Remember, you want bite-sized pieces, so we don't want things to be too tiny because then as they cook, they shrink a little bit and then they get extra mushy. So well, with the carrots, with these particular ones, I am going to take off each of the ends because they're a little dry. With this particular carrot, it's really not that big. I'm going to cut it in half first because this half is really skinny compared to the other half. This one's a little bit thicker. So what I like to do is to come this way, a finger and a thumb on either side, and I'm going to tuck the blade right here in the center and kind of let it bite into the carrot a little, and then come back and put my hand on top, and I'm going to cut down into the middle, kind of like a carrot stick. Now, this carrot is not going anywhere. This little bitty guy, he's a little rolly, yes, but he's really easy to kind of hold on to. So I'm going to go ahead and cut him into little circles or little carrot medallions, if you will. And those will be fine, good bite-sized pieces to go into my stir fry. And then these guys over here, you can do one at a time. It's up to you. These ones are skinny enough. If I had a really big one that I cut in half, I would definitely cut one at a time. But I'm going to come back and just do these. They're not going to roll anywhere because, again, there's a flat surface for them to be on. So they're not going to go anywhere. Once it gets too close, again, for the fingertips, you can be on top of the blade and then to clean those off. Going back to my bench scraper, picking up my carrots, and putting them into my bag. Oops. All right, folks, here we go. Now we are going to do an onion. The onions you're going to get is about 1/4 of an onion. You'll notice that the root is still attached. That's the squiggly part down here, and there's kind of a thicker part. Now, in all the videos that you've watched, I'm pretty sure that there's been several different ways that they've cut onions. I'm going to show you the one that I would prefer you use, mostly for safety purposes. So first things first, we need to take off the skin because this papery stuff doesn't taste good. So what I do is I take my quarter, lay it on a flat surface because there's 2 flat sides to it. It's not going to roll anywhere. And we're just going to take that very little bit of the top piece off, not where the root is connected, the opposite piece. What this does is allow us to see kind of the layers of the onion, and you can come back in and peel off the papery skin. Sometimes it sticks a little bit, so after a while I give up and I just take that top layer off, and that's good enough. So we get that out of the way. Now, still leaving this root ball attached, we are going to come in and we're going to make kind of like fingers, like little paw fingers on like an animal. So leaving the root end over to the side, we're going to come in and you're going to cut up from the end from like, about here up. We're not going to cut all the way through the onion. We're going to come up a little bit and you're going to cut in these little fingers. Some of the little pieces might fall out and that's okay. Don't worry about it. But you're going to cut in probably, 5, maybe 6 of these little paw fingers. Again, making sure we don't cut all the way through to the root end. So everything still stays connected. And then you have these little fingers that are separated, but it's not going to come apart. Now, in some of the videos that you see, they cut back inward. I would prefer that you not do that. First off, it's really not that necessary. And I can say that because I'm not a professionally trained chef or anything. But I personally think it's necessary because these are your strips anyway, as they come apart and they stack on top of each other in the onion. So when you come back and you're just going to cut them up, you're going to get a nice little diced onion. So the onions really are fine the way they are. Now, you can leave your onions as slices and big pieces of onion, but I don't know about you. I'm not too particularly fond of biting into an onion about yay big. Nope, no thank you. So I come back and I do like a nice big dice. So again, with those fingers cut in so that they stay together, laying it flat down, keeping your thumb back and your fingertips underneath. I'm going to cut straight down. And kind of go into a little bit bigger chunks. And what happens as you cut through, those fingers are one way and the onion layers are kind of going the other way. You're going to get a nice diced onion. You see how those pieces just kind of fall apart because of the layers and then the fingers that you cut in. You can come back through and break them up. And they're nice little pieces. To me, this is a little bit more tolerable to bite into. I'm not a huge fan of onion. I like the flavor that it can give to food, but I don't like to bite into a big piece of onion unless it's like an onion ring, and then I am so there. But when it comes to stir fry, I really like the big pieces like that. So, and we're just working in small pieces. Hopefully nobody gets too teary-eyed, but just make sure that you're standing up straight. When you have the onion juice on your hands, don't touch your eyes, don't touch your face. Obviously, it's going to burn a little bit. Ladies, with your mascara, there's a chance it could run, so make sure you wash your hands before you use a paper towel to wipe your eyes. If you have questions when it comes to the onion, if you have an onion, please call me over and I will help you out. Okay, the next one I'm going to do is garlic. So you're going to get some pieces of garlic that look like this. Can you see? Great. So you'll notice this garlic has kind of a paper on it, and we don't eat that paper, so we need to get rid of that. So this is something a little different that you need to know when it comes to smashing garlic. So yes, we do smash our garlic a little bit. Our garlic is minced, which means we want it into little bitty fine pieces. Nobody wants to bite into a huge piece of garlic. I mean, I love garlic, but I don't want to bite into a piece of it. I like a little bit of it just to kind of be there to impart the flavor. So when we use garlic, we pretty much always use the chef's knife, mostly because it's wide, and so is our garlic. So you'll notice this kind of fits. So putting the garlic at the edge, we're also going to put our knife at the edge. So this end here is going to kind of slide up against the bottom of the board. We don't want it up too high because then we have a gap. So we're going to kind of keep it off the edge of the board. So we're going to put the garlic so it lays kind of on one of its flat sides towards the edge. you're going to set the knife blade on top of it, keeping it steady, taking a good solid fist. We're just going to hit it. And what it's going to do, it should crack it, and some of that paper should start falling right off because you're going to break that clove of garlic up. And now all the peel should come right off. If it doesn't pop and doesn't break, go ahead and whack it again, and then get the piece off. With the garlic clove, I always leave the root end on there for a little bit because it kind of holds everything together. Gonna come back, it's very little, so make sure you keep your pinky or your fingertips tucked back underneath. And we're gonna come in, we're just gonna make little slices of the garlic first, and it might kind of fall apart. And then you're gonna take that root end out of the way and get rid of it. Now, we have these nice little slices of garlic, but again, too big of pieces. So you can use your blade to kind of scrape it back. And then using a method that they use a lot with herbs, you keep the tip of the blade on the board, your hand on top. See if I can do this so you can see it. And you're just going to kind of rock the knife back and forth, bringing it up just enough to get over the top of those little pieces of garlic and chop them into little pieces. And as it collects on the blade, just use your finger to gently slide them down, back onto the board, collect them back into a small pile. And doing the same thing, you're just going to rock back and forth and mince up this garlic into little bitty pieces. Okay, as small as you want to go. We don't make a paste out of our garlic. There is another way, and you kind of take these and do a smash and drag. We don't do a smash and drag in here. It's just not quite safe enough. So again, roll it into a pile, and then you can chop back and forth. And once you're done, you have a nice set of minced garlic. Okay, the second to last veggie we're going to cut is the cauliflower. Cauliflower, well, I love cutting cauliflower. It's really messy, but to be honest with you, I leave the broccoli till the very end because that's probably the messiest one. So when you get your hunk of cauliflower, it's going to look kind of like this. It's going to come in a quarter. It's still going to have the leaves attached to it. I already cleaned this one before I quartered it. So you're just going to come in and kind of cut in to take some of those leaves off. That's going to go in my garbage bowl. I'll leave these little bitty floret guys. This is what this is. It's called a floret, a little piece. The stem is totally edible. The whole thing is edible, so don't just throw away the stems because you can eat those. So as I pull some more of this leaf away, there is kind of a thick stem, and the closer you get to the center, the stem does get a little woody, so I do take some of that off and get rid of that. So what will happen is some of your cauliflower is going to break apart, and you get some nice big pieces. Now, big pieces are great, but those don't cook down so well. So what I like to do is just come back straight through because it doesn't really roll. You're just going to come back and cut in slices. And there are people who will actually take the entire cauliflower head and they will cut it in one big chunk, and they make brain slices, and you can actually grill it on a grill with those big slices like that, a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. So this is kind of like a brain slice to me if you're in biology or take biology where you dissect like the cow brain or whatever. You get kind of slices like this. So I take those flat slices and then just come back in and cut them in half just so that they're a little bit smaller pieces. Remember, a lot of our vegetables have a lot of water in them, so they cook up or they cook down and they get soft, and that water cooks out of them. So you don't want too small of pieces, but you don't want too big of pieces either, because then they're a little bit harder to eat. So again, coming back in, taking some of those bigger pieces and cutting them in half, making sure that you're pinching that blade between your thumb and that top knuckle so that you have better control of your vegetable. All right, so the last vegetable that we're going to cut is broccoli. I love broccoli. Cutting broccoli makes a mess no matter how I cut it. So if any of you come up with a magical way to do this, let me know. So what I'm going to do, the stem end or the of the broccoli is usually very woody. It's not very good tasting wise, but some of it closer towards the tree tastes fine. So I just like to take a little bit off, but the rest of it is okay. I just don't want like a long, massive piece, kind of like these guys. We want to take some of this off. But we want decent sized florets. So something like this size, if you compare it to my thumb, about the size maybe of a quarter. I'm going to leave it this big because it is going to cook down. I don't want to chop it too much more. I don't want little itty bitty dinky pieces like this guy because he's just going to turn to mush in the stir fry. So with these, depending on the broccoli, sometimes you'll get it where the head is really tight and it's got a big stem. This one is kind of long, but you'll notice if you look in here, the treetops, so to speak, are pretty far away from the main stem. Sometimes they're a whole lot shorter, and you can cut this up and then you just take the whole head and kind of chop it into pieces. But this one, it's a lot of really long pieces, so I'm going to go in and take the stems off of these. Some of these ones, this one had multiple stems attached to it, and when I cut into it, it's easy to break them apart into a few. So those are fine. Again, the smaller they are, they're going to get a little bit mushy. So I like mine to be decent size. Really, ultimately, guys, with the vegetable cutting, it's up to you. And that's the biggest question that I'll get is they'll say, Mrs. Koeppel, is this good enough? Is this too big? Is this too small? And really, guys, ultimately, it's up to you. If you like big pieces of vegetable, then go for it. If you don't like big pieces of vegetable, well, then maybe you want to cut it a little bit smaller. If they're even in size, they're going to cook all together fairly uniform. But if you have some pieces that are really big and some pieces that are really small, your small pieces are going to get done way faster than your bigger pieces. So ultimately, when you're cutting your vegetables, you want to make sure that your pieces are generally uniform in nature. So you don't want huge size differences with your vegetables, which is why we kind of talked about as we went through some of this, cutting some of those vegetables on the bias, cutting some of these into florets, and then your slices. If the slice of an onion or a bell pepper is too big, well, then cut those in half. And then they're a little bit smaller. They're a little bit, one, manageable to eat. And two, they're a little bit easier when it comes to actually having to cook them because they won't take quite as long to cook because they're small in size just like everything else, okay? So again, my broccoli, I like decent size. I try to keep it similar kind of in size as my cauliflower florets, so that way they tend to cook a little bit the same. Carrots are thicker in nature in general, so they're going to take a little bit longer to cook. So for most of you, your carrots are still going to be a little bit crunchy when you go to eat them. The only difference that you'll find, like if I go to cook this, say for dinner or something tonight, these are all fresh cut vegetables. So with your guys' vegetables, we do this a little bit differently. The reason you're putting them in the bag with your number, kitchen number and hour on it is because I'm actually going to freeze them. And these are going to go in the freezer overnight. And then I will pull those out on cook day, and then they will be frozen. And what you'll do is you'll put them in your stir fry pan. And because they're frozen, it's locked some of the water in it. And when you have cold water and high heat, which is what you're going to have in your skillet, it's going to create steam. And what we do is we take our lid and we put it inside the stir fry pan. It doesn't fit on top of the stir fry pan. It goes inside the stir fry pan, and you kind of mush your vegetables in the middle and push the lid down on top, and it traps the steam in. So what happens is as the vegetables start to thaw, the water drips down, hits the hot pan, and that steam comes up and it hits the lid of the pan, and it just creates it and traps it there. So it has this steam that's floating around underneath the lid, and it steams your vegetables. So it's going to do is soften your vegetables a little bit, but it's not going to turn them super mushy. It's just going to soften them so they're easier to chew with a slight bites to them. And then you can coat your chicken in there and throw your teriyaki sauce in and put everything together. So that's how we cut all 8 of our vegetables. The chicken, is very easy. It's going to be partially frozen still, which makes it kind of easier to cut. You have a couple options with that. You can absolutely use your chef's knife. If you're really intrigued by it, you can use your kitchen shears. They're in drawer number 1. They have an orange handle to them. Typically, you use those to cut through bone or nip little bitty herbs or like green onions or something, to cut those into those little ring circles. And those are kind of nice, but you can use that. You can actually cut your chicken into squares. You can use a knife and cut it just as easy. I like to have them still partially frozen because then they don't kind of slip around and it's not quite so slimy when you're trying to cut them. So that tends to be pretty helpful. So you'll cook your chicken with a little bit of vegetable oil, and then we'll have the sauce. So for Foods 1, I make your teriyaki sauce. Foods 2, you make it on your own, just in a smaller batch. And we'll talk about more of that on your eat day when you put together your rice and all your vegetables in the chicken. So if you have any questions, please make sure you ask before we get started. Otherwise, go ahead and get your kitchens ready. Get your vegetables, get your cutting board out, get your knives out, and I will come around with the blade sharpener and we'll go from there.